Cool. Awesome. Our demo is from Ty. Ty, you want to talk us through what you have built for this quarter?
Yeah, thank you, Nick. Yeah, so this is my first demo with this group. I'm really excited and proud of being a part of it. When I discovered the programmable banking community, I just started my journey of open source with my own projects. And so I'm really excited to contribute to this community as well, just either in terms of ideas or sharing ideas or building things that might be useful for folks. So today I'm going to talk you through a creation, my first creation on Investec's programmable banking platform. It uses Telegram. Out of interest, is there anyone here not familiar with Telegram? Maybe user reaction. Telegram is an instant messenger. It's like WhatsApp. It has a large number of different usability features. And of course, everyone has their taste for their different platforms. But I've actually used Telegram for quite a few automation projects now. And I'll give you an example of what that looks like today. And then maybe you can make use of it. And by the way, all of this is already open source. So if you see a link, you can go to GitHub right now and take a look for yourself. Okay, I'm going to move to the next slide. So my name is Ty Lucas. I mentioned a moment ago that I started open sourcing my projects. I've put a lot of effort into writing some documentation for each of them and theming them and pulling together reasons why I've created them. You can find them at that link on GitHub, along with references to my other open source projects. And so today I'm going to talk to you about my spin summaries creation with Telegram. So in terms of requirements, I needed a way to easily rank my monthly costs. I wanted it to be real-time and up-to-date, and the API gives you that, which is really exciting. And I wanted a visual representation of my costs with no additional tools. I didn't want to go to a website or build something that I had to install on my devices. And because I had Telegram in my pocket already, I'm good to go. The technologies that I used was, of course, Investec's programmable card and APIs. I chose MongoDB as a document database to store the transactions with a very kind of minimal schema, or no effort for schema, and I'll talk about that in a moment. I used AWS SQS to transmit messages between my application components, and then I host my Python application on a container on my own hardware, and I use Telegram Spot API to interact with Telegram. So my quote of the day to share with you is by Donald Knuth. It's much more rewarding to do more with less. And I like that quote because I like to build things that are as minimal as possible and as simple as possible. And you'll get an idea of that with this application. I think it's distinct in that it's as simple as it can be and still provide value. So let me give you an example about how it works, but I'll start with an architecture diagram. So there's a few main components to this creation. Of course, on the top, we've got Investec's platform with programmable card and banking APIs. You'll see on the bottom left, a MongoDB Cloud database cluster. MongoDB Cloud is a hosted offering of MongoDB that uses a 3-cluster model for free, costs you nothing, super easy to set up. And there are two features of that technology that I use here. One is HTTPS endpoints, which provides a completely generic way, like a REST-style interface, to be able to insert data into your database. And then they also support a mechanism called triggers, where if there's a change in your data, it will, run the workflow of your choosing. And it's quite flexible in that they provide an integration with things like AWS Event Bridge, from which you can then send the message on to whatever else you want to do. So in this case, I've got a pairing between AWS Event Bridge and SQS in order to turn my transaction into a message that can flow to wherever I need it to be. And then more on the right-hand side, you could see now the Docker container of my Python application, which you see linked there. You can go to the URL now and take a look at the code. So it's a containerized Python application, and it has a miniature SQLite database with it because I needed to be able to associate the Telegram user with the the distinct client credential that interacts with the APIs. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. So then, yeah, on the right-hand side, you could see the Telegram API, and then on the end, your device. So the way the flow works is that when you create a charge on either your physical card or a virtual card, and the virtual cards have a very useful kind of grouping feature of transactions, which I'll illustrate in a moment. Some code, which I'll show you in a second, runs on the card. It inserts the transaction into the MongoDB database, issues a trigger that then makes my application aware of it. And then either if more information is needed or useful, it will go to the banking APIs and fetch more information from the account. Right. I'm going to move on to the next slide. So because we're all software engineers here, I thought I'd show a little bit of code. On the left is the familiar boilerplate code that you see on your programmable card. In this particular instance, all I'm doing is taking the transaction object in that card lambda and turning it into a JSON document, which I then transmit to MongoDB Cloud to their HTTPS endpoint product. Super simple. And then on the right-hand side is a little bit of code that you would write on MongoDB in response to the HTTP endpoint request. And so their handler effectively gives you access to the document body, and I parse it and then stick it straight into a database. Super simple. I don't think it could be simpler, really. So they really make it easy to integrate. If you're familiar with MongoDB and some of their client tools, they have a product called MongoDB Compass, which you can install onto your computer. And then this is an example of my database that I've created. And so you can query the database by using filters. There are other mechanisms and more complex features of MongoDB that I'm not going to talk about here. But in this particular example, you can see that the query I'm using is to fetch a reference that is equal to simulation and a date time that's greater than or equal to 916. And then that is the result that you can see in the view. And of course, it's, yeah, you're all familiar with that. Right, let me give you a demo. So I just need to say that if you look at my code, there is actually a demo mode in the code. So all of this is made up information. It's just random junk. So don't associate any kind of actual meaning to the to what you see here. So in Telegram, they provide a start button for a bot to interact with. And then if you click on show profile, what my application does, it will give you a listing of all your accounts. Just by way of example, you'll see in a moment, I'll manufacture an asynchronous event from a charge. So if I did a charge on one of my cards, you'll see it pop up. I wanted it to be slightly more interesting than just a push notification. So what this will do is it'll tally the charge by a particular merchant over the course of a month, and then we'll tell you what the total is over time. I wanted to make the notifications smarter and not just kind of what I already get on my push notifications from the app and the SMS experience that you normally get. Talk more about that in a moment. So in terms of card activity, you can go to the menu, select cards, and then my app will find the cards associated with your profile. And if I select my personal card, you'll see the visualization of the ranking of charges. And I just chose a pie chart in this particular case. So moving on, if you go back to the cards function, we select, for instance, subscriptions card. And this is really what's so handy about virtual cards, is that you can group your transactions and very nicely, trivially, really. And so in this particular case, when I set up the profile in my application, I associated subscriptions with that particular card. And then so here we can see the proportion of subscriptions over the month. And my personal philosophy here is I treat subscriptions as optional things. So if I want to save money, I just know what the most expensive subscription is that I want to trim, and then I can just trim that. So for me, it's the proportion of the charges that's the most important here, not necessarily the amounts themselves. But I guess, with a small change, you could visualize the amounts too, not just the percentages. Okay, and then if you want to take a look at the account itself, if you specify the accounts command, it will give you the list of everything on the backing account. And this uses card APIs to fetch that information. Okay, and then a little bit of history. So I thought it might be fun to group across different categories. So in your transactions that you fetch from your account history, it gives you like a, I guess, a category description. So I thought it might be interesting to tally across those. So then, you could see over the past month, what is the proportion of costs that I've spent in these different areas. Of course, this is a very basic example, but you get the idea. So I'll talk briefly about some of the challenges that I encountered here. So because this is a Dockerized container application, I needed to properly configure locale settings. I wasn't tremendously familiar with it, so it took a bit of while and experimentation to get right, unfortunately. But you can't really hack things like currency strings. You'll discover quickly if you want a general solution, you have to use locale settings. And I'll give an example about that in the next slide, which will be quite fun for you. Telegram Python bot has a bit of a learning curve. You need familiarity with Python's async IO programming paradigm. It's not complicated. You just need to be familiar with it and how to work with it. You need to know how to set up event handlers. You need to be familiar with the concept of conversations. That can be a little bit of a pain to generate, working solutions with conversations, because conversations track context across interactions in bot terms, and then event injection in order to do the push notification example that I showed you. But all of that is in the code. You're welcome to go check it out and see how it works. It's much easier if you've got a working example. Obviously, this is something that you'll all be familiar with. Charges in foreign currencies require conversion. So I chatted to the community over Slack a couple of weeks ago, and a couple of folks said, hey, here are some free APIs that you could use to do that. So, none of the numbers will make sense unless you could do currency conversion. For the SQLite instance embedded in the container application, I chose SQL Alchemy. You'll see in my writing, I will pick technologies as a learning opportunity. SQL Alchemy has quite a steep learning curve. And incidentally, I've found that GPTs do quite a good job of showing you usable examples, because the ORM has quite a few different modes of how to use it, and you have to pick one and use it correctly. Otherwise, you get kind of odd or no kind of results on your database. Um, like with all ORMs, they have a place, so use them with care. So here's a basic example about how to set up the locale settings. On the top half, you've got the Docker setup. So I wanted ENZA in order to do South African rands. And because this is a Python container based on Debian, those are the commands that you would use to set up your locales. Not well documented, surprisingly poorly documented, or maybe I was just looking in the wrong places. And then on the bottom section, the minimal Python code that you would use to read the locale settings from the environment, and then generate a proper currency string. So at the bottom, you'll see there I've got a float whose value is 1.5, and then converting that into a currency string, you get R1.50. So a lot of stuff just to get something so simple working. So let's talk about next steps of the projects. You'll see in the code that I've built this thing with multi-user in mind. And in fact, the thing that's running at the moment is that kind of intent. But I haven't yet opened it up to be used by other folks. So if you want to use it, you'll have to fork it and run your own bot. It's pretty simple to set up. It's not a lot of work. I do have another bot, which you'll see in my documentation that anyone can use right now, and I'm quite happy with it. Works quite well. And the reason that I'm not kind of opening this up just yet is that I need to learn more about some of the compliance and cryptographic expectations around building these things as a third-party creator, right? I don't know the rules around storage of transaction history of individuals that is not me. I don't know what qualifies as personally identifiable information in this context. And these are all super strict and very rigid rules in the industry. So I don't know as a third party exactly what my position is with these things. I'm familiar with some of the best practice from my own work, but yeah, this is kind of where I'm at with the project. I think there's definitely more interesting visualizations possible. If ever you've played with things like, Jupyter notebooks, you can really have very fancy ways to visualize data. So I chose pie charts. Maybe there's some more interesting ones. And then smarter notifications. Right now, my notifications are very straightforward, but I don't like noise. So when I say smarter, it might be interesting to have a notification come up if there's a new charge or an unexpected charge or something that hasn't happened for a couple of months, so that I can know about that. Because I should know what my charges are, but if something comes up that I don't expect, like for instance, like a good example is you can pause an Audible subscription for 3 months, and if you forget about it, then it'll just start charging again. Okay, if you want to get involved, you can fork my project or start a discussion on GitHub. I'm happy to volunteer more of my time to work on this thing. So if you want to see it, do something interesting, or if you would like a change that you can just merge in on your own fork, I'm happy to do that. As I mentioned at the beginning, you can find all of my open source projects at that GitHub location. And one of them that I needed to create is yet another Python client for Investec APIs. I'm pretty pleased with it because it provides a good segregation between the different scopes, so that for maintainability purpose. It has a single Boolean that you can specify on instantiation to use the sandbox APIs. So and the other Python clients in the community have yet to kind of incorporate that. So I thought it would just be nice just to have a very simple way of saying, true, false. And then you can add additional headers, HTTP headers that aren't in the core specification for banking APIs, like for instance, specifying compression encoding. That you can specify on the client in addition to the headers that it already use. That's already on PyPy and it's open source. So if you want to check it out right now, you can go ahead and play with it. And hopefully you'll find it useful. I would love to make additions to it. I'm happy to take pull requests. I definitely would not recommend forking this project. I'm happy to spend time talking with you about how we barter the time necessary to make extensions down the line. But it does the minimum, which I'm happy with. All right, and that is my demo for you today. I hope you enjoyed it. Are there any questions?
That was
No.
actually, yeah, that was actually pretty cool. But Henny, have you got a question?
No, I've just got comments. That's very sexy.
Yeah.
I really enjoy what you've done there.
Thanks. I'm glad you like it. I missed some of the questions in the. Sorry. I promise I'm not changing the slides right now.
No, that's me. Apologies.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Were there some questions in the chat that I missed earlier?
I'm just taking a look here. Guys found it pretty interesting. Davina thought there were some insights were pretty valuable. So that was actually
Nick, can I ask a question on that?
Yeah, please, Davina.
Hi guys, I'm Davina. I look after programmable banking for the bank. It was really, really nice to see. And I'm always interested in things that make our clients' lives easier. So it was nice to see those insights. I made the comment that actually, it's always sometimes the most simplest basic insights that clients are actually looking for. And to get it like on the fly as you kind of swipe your card is super cool. What I wanted to just ask is to provide those insights. You obviously have done some level of categorization of those transactions. Can you just talk a little bit more about what you did there to get
sure.
that?
Yeah, it's a great question. I would hardly call what's going on in my bank account big data, but a lot of the functions here are just grouping functions of the database. So for instance, and that's kind of why I chose MongoDB, because it gives you a very permissive schema, and then you can just say, well, aggregate on this particular field, for example. So you could say aggregate by merchant name or aggregate by transaction type, and the database does all the heavy lifting for you. So a lot of this is just relying on the existing grouping functions of the database. But certainly, you can imagine with enough data, you could do more data science type stuff, where you can create, I would say, I guess more sophisticated summaries of the data. But yeah, I'm not there yet. I hope that answers your question.
No, that's perfect. We've just over the course of the history in programmable banking, we've had a number of people, work on categorization because it's probably the number one thing that people want to see. So it's I'm not sure we've kind of got the silver bullet for it yet, but I'm always so impressed to see the numerous ways that you guys are coming up with different categorization engines and how you're looking at it. So I think it's definitely something that we as Investec are going to start paying more attention to over the next couple of months and see how we kind of apply our minds to harden out, even if it's something that we can put live to clients. So I'm really keen to kind of start the sifting through everything from a community perspective and have you guys help us with this. It's going to be really nice.
That's exciting. Yeah, look, I almost never look at my kind of breakdown of my bank statements. I just trust that, you know, I've not missed anything or that it's correct and true, right? Because, you know, it's just not the most interesting thing for me to spend time on. But, you know, you do discover things where it's like, am I still subscribed to that thing? That's okay. You know, things do fly under the radar, I think. And so the purpose of this application was to kind of really highlight those kind of things. So, you know, using the pie charts to give proportion of costs across these things, it for me is interesting because if I want to eliminate the top one, it's already ranked. I could just say, okay, I can just can that one and I'm saving money. And then another view would be like the kind of low flyers, you know, so, you know, charges under a certain amount. What is the ranking of those things and why are those charges there and what are those things actually for? That is interesting to me, and one of the motives behind building this thing is kind of making more signal from noise in my banking profile.
And I think that the easy categorization by virtual card, I think is quite nifty. It just gives another tool to do group high level categorization of certain expenses, which I think
Absolutely.
is quite interesting use of the virtual card.
Yeah, no, the virtual card is wonderful. I absolutely love it. Because yeah, as you say, it just creates a trivial bucket in which to put certain types of costs. And then everything just works with that in terms of the visualizations. So yeah, I love that.
Can I just ask one last question?
Go ahead.
What would be your feedback on using the virtual card API in there?
I really credit Devon's work for creating the Postman collection. For me, that really made getting into the whole thing so much easier because I can see a very practical example of what works. So that was a huge kind of like icebreaker for me getting into the integration with the APIs is I have a model that works. What do I need to do? I think if there's any feedback that I would give on top of that is it's not clear what some of the fields actually mean, like you infer information from them. Like for instance, the posted order, I'm assuming that's a counter, you know, so some of the kind of not obvious values that you get back from the APIs are not always clear. It's semi-obvious what they are, but yeah, it would be nice to have them documented more explicitly.
Devon's probably laughing at us because we had this exact conversation where he was giving us feedback yesterday, actually, in our offices around all of the stuff, and he said exactly the same thing. So
yeah, great.
So heard.
Cool. All right.
Cool. Is there anything else? Michelle, is there anything else that we missed in the chat, you think?
There's nothing else that was missed in the chat.
Okay, great. I'll take a look at the chat now myself, and if there's anything that I want to add there, you know, go ahead. I would prefer if you want to reach out to me, bring it to one of the rooms. It would be good to just have everyone see the responses and the questions and stuff like that. You're welcome to send me an instant message if you want, but you know, I would say if you want to broach a question, you know, just mention me in the appropriate Slack room, and then we can go from there.
Awesome, thanks.
Thank you.
If there's anything else, Ty's here all week, so you can chat to him on the chat and Slack. It's all good. Okay, cool. So Torean's got a pretty cool one that I'm really excited about, and he's been trying to show it to me for a while, and I've been following this for a while, so it's actually pretty interesting. And Torean's been great that everything that he's been doing, he's been documenting it in the Slack sort of in the channels itself. So you can go back and see where we started from. and it's actually pretty interesting. So Torean, you want to walk us through your really cool demo here?
Yes. Right. Okay. Hi, guys. So I'm Torean, software engineer at companies Trickster and Waitroom. I have my link there to my website, but essentially what I wanted to do was take a different spin on trying to actually kind of help me iterate relatively quick. So the idea was I wanted to have the ability to kind of workflow like transactions, or like at least the need to like do some form of transformations on it or side effects with running the least amount of code possible. And then the reason for this was I have a bunch of ideas, and the problem is I can never sit down with enough time to like focus on one vertical slice of it. So I thought to myself, maybe I can just build a tool that I can iterate on, extend over time, and then kind of help me get to the points of the vertical ones that I could spend more time working on. The current stack of it right now, I'm using Erlang and Elixir for the API part, along with Phoenix for the actual front end, live view specifically. I'm hosting it currently now on Google Cloud, but this doesn't necessarily mean you have to host it there. But I'm using a VM that has Nginx certbot and Postgres as the persistence layer. Everything is packaged up Docker Compose so that I actually run on the VM. All right, next slide. All right, so the comment I went with, the quote I went with was, the goal is to turn data into information and information into insight. And the real reason like I did this, this quote was mainly because I like the idea of like knowing I can almost like program myself and my habits. So I need more data, and having data actually helps me get that message across for myself at least. And this was from Carly Fiora, former CEO and chair of HP. Right, next slide. All right, so because the application is very broad, in a way you could use it for like most things. There's a couple of use cases that I wrote down over here. And one of the use cases I'm going to be showing and demoing. But the idea is, for example, maybe you want to send a push notification to yourself or Slack message with a custom messages, or use other external services like Twilio to send you SMSs. Even just doing some sort of CRUD operations against owned like Google Sheets, maybe you want to update, read from, or just conditionally expressing like, conditionally expressing things on the document, which is a way for you to actually almost like use the IDE itself from Investec to actually be the result and determine if transactions are allowed or not. And the other things generally just HTTP calls, or even just using it for notes, like general notes or comments for yourself. So the idea of it is generally the document itself is just, you can think of it as each text block in the document is a potential function. And I'm using natural language, or using ChatGPT at the moment now through prompts, and I'm busy fine-tuning some data, but it helps generate pseudocode. And based off the pseudocode, I actually use actual compiled code that I've whitelisted and I have on the platform to execute. But I'll go more into that on the next slide. Right, next slide. All right, so the general basic diagram that I try to get up to show how it works. So the application is not, you can think of it as an API gateway. Right now, I'm specifically using it for the programmable banking card, but clients could be anything, could be web apps, mobile apps, any other service, but anything that could technically make an post request to tell the actual document to execute the pseudocode that it has generated. And because it's using, you can host it anywhere, and it's like contained using Docker, you could spin up a couple VMs, Google Cloud in this example, with the load balancer that would actually go and push the data through to the running exposed port of the application, which is Docker containerized, holding the actual Phoenix and Postgres. These are not meant to actually, I made it mainly for like self-hosting reasons. So that's why you don't see like the doing is worried about like scaling like horizontally. But the idea is for you to have your own kind of like tool sets that you can extend and use as you're busy kind of iterating on other projects. All right, next slide. All right, so you can, because it's like the IDE, most of you will be familiar with the actual like functions you normally like use. Ty actually showed as well. But on the left-hand side, you could see that the two main functions before and after, where you just actually need to take the authorization or like transaction data and pass it through to, like in this case, the document. I have a function there at the bottom that I'm just passing it through, which is just a general post request, but it's using the same URL that I showed earlier on the actual diagram. And you can just pass the payload through, and then on the document itself on the right, you can kind of use natural language to infer what you're trying to achieve. Obviously, I have a whitelist to kind of like scope it down and like narrow what options you're allowed to do. But this doesn't stop you from adding your own, adding more to the prompt, fine tuning your own model, and just like having it so that you can kind of have more pseudo functions made that you execute that's compiled on your version or instance of the application. All right, next slide. All right, so the base functionality of the system is mainly two parts, just documents and text blocks. There are other things, but I'll get into that a bit later. But a document is generally just a way to organize a sequence of text blocks. So when the system is executed, every block does get run sequentially, or its attempt tries to run if there is code generated for it. If not, it'll just skip over it, which is why I mentioned you could use it as just notes for yourself. But essentially, you can also select the outcome or the result of the document when it is being posted to or executed. By default, false will always be returned. The text block itself uses natural language or GPT to kind of like generate pseudocode that I kind of set up to itself to explain what you're trying to do. And this way I could actually like make pseudocode functions that aren't necessarily actual functions, but the syntax would seem familiar to most because it'll kind of look like JavaScript, for example, those function names. But these functions, all they do is you pass data to it by obviously typing what you're trying to pass to it. And it'll like try to generate based on inferring what you typed. And these could be arithmetic functions like add, subtracting, or referencing results of previously run blocks or text blocks, or doing some comparison operations. Maybe you want to just return like true or false based on some transaction value that you see on the data that was sent, or just logging out some other data that you want to just have for yourself. So the idea is like, because everything is like whitelisted, I have a bunch of functions, obviously for scope and security purposes, that it'll only like execute if it passes the actual whitelist. It uses the Alexa's AST, which is like a tree version of like of how Alexa out of like represents code, and you can actually like pattern match to actually check that the function generated is relevant to the whitelist that you have. Alongside that, with schema input for each function that you add, as well as potentially, I'm going to be moving this to a separate process, which is not part of the application, so they kind of sandbox when they are being executed as well. All right, the next slide. Okay, so I'm going to just run through a little demo that I have over here. So I'm going to just share my screen. Let me know if the screen is a bit too wide, so I could always move it to another screen.
Sure.
It's good.
Yeah,
okay,
looks
cool.
good.
Okay, so you can see on the left-hand side, this is just the ID itself with an example payload that I just commented out here, which would be sent through the authorization or transactions. I have the custom function that I showed earlier on one of the images, as well as showing the actual like URL for the document that I'm going to be posting to. You can see the URL is like, will match the actual one that's been generated already or made. So all I do is like post, and when I do, you have this document that you just add blocks to. So in this example, what I did was I was just trying to actually kind of mutate the transform string so that I could actually use side effects to send it to myself. So I'm actually typing out there to kind of get like from the map input, which would be the input of the document itself being called, and using prop drilling style way to actually tell it what key under this complex object. The next block, what I actually do over here is I'm actually just trying to tell it that I want to just join two strings together. And these are all functions that are actually already compiled and like as modules on the system. So we need to extend. But over here, just general merchant name, which is a string joining operation, as well as one of the other built-in functions that get generated, which is just referencing what the result of another text block before would be. So with that in mind, you can see it generated like kind of pseudocode, what it's going to look like. And if I actually go and try to execute or this actual document, so over here, I simulate the transaction because I'm using like just the logs initially. You can see the document's result because it was selected, actually being the join string of what was actually passed to it. Because I can use this for side effects before or after the transactions, I set up a function to actually send Slack notifications for data. And in this case, all I'm doing is just taking that newly made reference before, and then just telling myself I'm going to send a message to Slack. This obviously uses webhooks, so in this case, but I just made it briefly. So yeah, I actually have the, oh, sorry about the noise quickly, just hang on quickly. All right, so yeah, I actually have it. You can see that it actually gets, yeah, actually executed, and the, yeah, it gets sent. Yeah, I actually update and try again with an updated merchant, and you can see that gets posted as well. So, all right, I'm gonna just stop the actual screen share, Nick.
Cool. I'll just share the other screen again.
All right, cool.
There we go.
All right. So the challenges that I encountered, the main one was the persistence layer. I used initially Elixir's like built-in like amnesia with debts and ETS. It's for distributed like persistence across like multiple like nodes. The problem was because I want to package this in a way so that anyone could potentially use it themselves, host it locally, wherever. I needed like a persistence layer that's practically has more support. So that's where I stuck with Postgres. And that was quite a long change. So the other thing that I did was the hosting. I kind of boxed myself in with Fly.io in the beginning. They were actually good, but I wanted to actually get more familiar with the Docker files and the options available. So this is where I actually went and moved to use Google Cloud to actually host the instances. And now I have a couple of things that are failing all the time because of the images that I'm using, the versions, and and yeah, Elixir doesn't. It's kind of like you go against the grain if you try to put it inside of a Docker container because it kind of has its own way of like managing distributed systems, and so I had to kind of like work against that. One of the other issues I had was because I used Phoenix Live View, which is kind of like use WebSockets to kind of update so you can actually join channels and have multiple people use an application at the same time. The load balancer wasn't straightforward initially for me. The load balancer wasn't like liking the handshake for like the actual socket, so the actual front end wasn't always working. So that was a little bit of a backward pedaling, but I went through that and eventually got that working and figured out the server like updates I have to do for the load balancer. Then the prompt-based AI right now, currently now it doesn't scale, and I already have a plan in place to fix that. The main issue is because I was trying to describe what for the pseudocode, it kind of puts you in a spot where you adding, so you either need to either refine tune if you're all going to be doing fine tuning, or you kind of have to extend the prompt, which eventually scales like badly with regards to like pricing and tokens that you have to keep sending. So I actually have a couple of things in place that I'm busy working on. It's not in the demo, but it kind of like makes each of the functions be kind of like classes that manage their own like way of how they should be described. And that's what I'm currently working on at the moment now. The CI is currently, like I mentioned, I had some issues, but right now that it's not automatic enough. So when I build things, there's not too much of a concern just yet because I expect people to put it down themselves and host it themselves. But for the demos and things, it's still manual because CI is failing with the images that I'm using for Docker. So I have to manually SSH into the box and pull down the images from the registry and then just restart it every time. It's not a lot, but it's just, yeah, it does slow things down. And then one other thing is the general research that I want to put into like the design UX for the actual application. So right now, I need a little bit of like maybe references or ideas or thoughts because I built the functionality, but it would be nice to actually have like maybe some research or like ideas around how one visualize a tool that's actually allows people to just type things and kind of represents majority of the options you have available to you at any given time. All right, next slide. Yeah, so the next steps, I'm planning on giving the ability to manually add like functions, like typing it in, so I don't have to be stuck to using AI. So once the documentation is there, you know the options of functions, so you could just type it in, and that would be working the same way as what the code generates for GPT. maybe having access keys that you could assign to documents so that you can have people need to use it that before they get executed. So you could add like short-lived ones. You can have them expire, revoke them, just so that they don't. You can give them to others to actually execute documents that you own or you made. Adding like a landing page, this is more for like myself, but it would be cool to have like a landing page anyway, just so I can get an idea of people wanting to use it. So that will obviously not be me building out a one that holds data of everyone, but just for like me having data to know the usage or the wants to actually use something like this. And then just the fine tuning and the data. So that's ongoing. Right now, I do have data that I have with each persistence, like each Postgres like table on each instance will have that it doesn't delete. That's like a soft delete, so that I can end up going and actually training the actual model around like what should have actually happened in certain cases, so that it becomes more and more accurate as time goes on. And then, yeah, the last thing I actually want to do is just get an image that I can have others pull down, and there's actually like use play around hosted in your Raspberry Pi. It's relatively lightweight, so at least easy to like set up. But yeah, that is the next steps. Next slide, please. Yeah, so to get involved, right now, I have to I have the repo that I need to like send the actual link. That's still like private. There's some things I was still busy working on, but I'm gonna actually by this week or beginning of next week just post a link people can pull down. You can play around with it. It's containerized, so you just have to have Docker and have to worry about installing too much things. And you need to obviously just set up your compose with the details for your environments for each of those environments that you want to set up for. And you can add me on Slack. The GitHub repo is not there, but my actual GitHub account is there, which I will also post later on if I go back to it and just update the actual visibility of the project for everyone to use. And yeah, that's that's pretty much the update. So
I think that's pretty cool. I think you're downplaying a lot of the stuff, but I think that was actually pretty cool work there, if you think about it. So well done.
yeah, thank you.
Any
I don't know if there's any questions.
Sorry, you have a question from Rudy. Rudy's asking, have you tried using semantic kernel and adding API as a skill?
I have not, so I'm actually going to add that to the list of things here, Rudy. Thank you for that, because I notice I'm getting a list of things I want to try, but I don't always know what is the best one to work for me. So I'm all for trying that out.
Yeah, semantic kernel I think will definitely help, as a lot of the code wouldn't have to be rewritten. You could, using natural language, if you just define your API with the skills properly, you could just say, give me the last 5 transactions. And instead of generating code for that, it will have it as a skill already. So it would know, okay, cool,
Yeah.
to get the last 5 transactions, it will have get transactions with a count to it. You could categorize with that, and now you're not hitting an API. For example, you're not hitting the ChatGPT API, which costs you every time. You are hitting
Correct.
your own API or the Investic API, so your charges will be less tokenization, and then you can also start using like Ada DaVinci or one of the other models to summarize it, which is a lot cheaper than trying to use a GPT 3.5. So that's what we're currently doing. You summarize it with a cheaper one, and then you use a bigger model to understand the information, which might work out a little bit better for you.
Could you give the names of those 2 things again?
So it's semantic kernel, and then you use Ada DaVinci, which is a cheaper. It's the cheaper
I've seen
model.
that model as well. Awesome.
Otherwise, just send me a Slack message and I'll help you with that. I work on it at the moment permanently, so I'll gladly help.
Thank you so much, man. Thanks for that.
Sweet.
Awesome.
Right. Any other questions? I actually got to check the chat. I haven't even checked.
Nick, it's Davina again. I've got
Hi,
2 comments. Geez, you can really see you've done a lot of work on this, and it's impressive. So well done. I think there's a lot for us to think about, and I think Kenny and myself and Ernie and Devin and the team are gonna go back and have a good think about this and how where you can use it. So I'm not a coder, so I'm gonna ask a very interesting question to you. And
All right.
if it's a dummy question, forgive me, dev
There's
community.
no dumb questions. Don't worry.
No, it's all good.
I think the question here for me is it's apparent to me that this is a really useful tool for devs even coming in and wanting to start and play around and get up and running really quickly. So for me, that's like really exciting. But what would be the like application here for someone like me who can't code to use like this sort of tool to just be able to, in very natural language, say what I want my card to do and be able to have that happen?
Okay, that's actually a good question. So because the initial implementation, there's a couple of actual features that I've like omitted. The idea that I had in mind was I want to do like masking of URLs, so you won't have to use new generated documents all the time, and then kind of like put yourself in a position where you store one like constant like URL that you can change references to on the application itself, and then you can obviously reassign like the link to that, so without needing to go into the IDE itself to update. You just update your documents. The idea that you could then use is obviously, if you're extending it to add more functionality, you could just have a bunch of functions. And given that if you have a bunch of documentation that I can add around like what options are available, depending on whose instances is, they would need to be responsible for that. But you could add things like maybe you want to just go onto the application to say whenever there's a transaction that's failed, you want to just update a spreadsheet. So you can type that in natural language, and if the code has already been made modules for on the actual like system, you don't have to worry about updating the actual like code on the IDE from a Vestix API. You can just actually add documents or even just reference that link that you've added to another document to do something else. So it's more of a toolbox that I've set up mainly initially for myself to help me iterate quickly on other specific projects, but it doesn't stop you from having this being hosted somewhere or someone hosting this and then giving someone else like the ability to execute these things that they've made as documents that they've added functionality for. I don't know if that answers the question.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. That answers it. Well done.
Oh, thank you.
Very cool. So if you guys want to chat more or ask any more sort of questions about this, because I think it's pretty cool, and I think Torean's hiding a lot of stuff at the back end of that, but there's a lot of work there that he's been doing. So he's on chat, he's on Slack. Please get in contact with him. And Rudy, thank you very, very much for your whole insights to help him. I think that's exactly what the community is here for, and why we kind of have the meetup is just simply, hey, didn't think about that. That's actually kind of cool. I'm working with that. So well done. Thank you. Cool. Moving on to some community updates. Guys, before we jump into that, the usual sort of thing, we would really love your feedback on tonight's meetup. If you guys can give us some quick feedback on the event itself, how we can make it better, how we, what exactly you found cool, what you didn't find cool, or anything like that, we'd really appreciate it. And then there's also some bonus sort of questions there. Again, I'll give a super random draw. I won't just pick one this time. There'll be multiple people that will be all randomly drawn to win some swag. So it's in your best sort of whole interest. Just hints, just giving a bit of a hint here. This will be well worth it if you just fill in the feedback. We'd really appreciate that. Just some quick updates around the community. As you guys might have seen before, in the last month, I've been pushing this hard. If you haven't seen it, tell me how I can communicate this a bit better. We've been moving across our Slack from the old Slack, from the whole Office in Slack workspace to a new dedicated workspace. If you haven't joined the link, please join the link we'll put now. And if you want to invite one of your friends, one of your cool mates that you think is going to add some value to the community or is going to get some value from this community, please feel free to also invite them to the community. It is open to everyone. It is a programmable banking investec sort of whole API, but if you want to play around with it, there's a lot of stuff that the guys are doing around it. So that's pretty cool. And then just as a heads up, from October, our email address, you're going to see a new email address coming, like hitting your boxes around developer community at investec.co.za. So instead of the community at Offizen, it's going to come from in Investec. Well, so just watch out for that. So if you don't see anything from us in a month, just please check your spam or promotions folder and just let us in there. We'd really appreciate that. But also on another note, because of all these changes, we are doing these changes. But there's a nice little home message from Aretha or Shan. Would you like to just jump in here?
Thanks, Nick.
Sure.
So as we hand over things more to Investec to take over, I just wanted to firstly just thank everyone in the community. It's been a humongous effort and so much support from the developer community to actually get us to the point that programmable banking is now a reality in South Africa. This was one of our goals, to open up banking functionality and actually drive real innovation in the finance space. And it's been such an incredible journey to go on with all of you. And I personally, I know Shan as well, resonates with this, but I've learned so much and grown so much with this community. When I think back to my top experiences with the community, not all of you would have been there, but Nick hosted many a make day where we got everyone building self-watering plants. Maybe one day we'll go back there again. But like the joy and the aha and wow moments of people when their plants started flooding their desk. Also, when we started out, we were doing weekly meetups with everyone doing demos, and it was quite a lot of work to get someone to commit to a demo every week, but really got us up and running, got us to know each other, got the wheels moving. And I just got to meet so many wonderful and inspiring and really committed human beings. So it's been an incredibly informative and amazing journey for me. I know that Shan and I are both really excited to continue to be part of this community and also see the evolution and the growth that happens under Investec and Nick's wonderful stewardship. And Shan and I are onto our next adventure, though we will obviously be sticking around and being active in the community. But we're on an adventure as make.dev. And our mission is to drive impactful innovation by connecting developer communities and growing developer communities and helping them engage with businesses in a meaningful way. So we'll be launching some new developer opportunities and experiences before the end of this year. So stay tuned on the Offizen Slack to see what's happening in the pipeline and get in touch with us if you want to know what's happening. We'd always love to chat. And then also, Nick, next slide. Just a massive shout out to both Ben Blaine, who was the first Programmable Banking Community Manager, and also Nick, who has been our stalwart community leaders over the last 3 years and really, really helping to make this journey a possibility. And of course, the Investec team. I think Davina, Neil, and Henny might be the only ones here. But of course, none of this would be possible without Investec having taken such a brave leap to actually open their tech up and start to grow and nurture this community. So thanks, everyone.
That's awesome. I'm sure if we all had our sounds on, you would hear the clapping and the roar and the sobs in the corner. So it's clear.
We're not on butter at this time, so we can't do
Yeah,
the
great.
sound effects.
And there's a reason for that, Shan. There's a reason for that. Cool. Thank you very much. Hopefully we'll.
Nick, can I just
Please.
can I add something there to Aretha?
Mm.
I think just it's for us, it's exceptionally exciting, I think, for Investec to be kind of taking over the reins from such an amazing start. And I think I know that, you know, like our journey with Make and Shan and Aretha is definitely going to continue going forward. I think there's going to be some amazing opportunities for us to strengthen the relationship and the partnership that's already happened. From an Investec perspective, I think, you know, it's been such an amazing journey. And I think for me personally, I think we often speak about this in the API team. I think very few people in their careers get an opportunity to start something that was never there before and build it up from scratch. And it's a hard graft, but I think when you do it with such amazing team like the Make team, the Offizen guys, Nick, having you as part of Investec now is super exciting. And for me, I think Shan, Aretha, Milan, Ben, all of you guys, like, just continue to be part of this family going forward. But like all families, we grow and figure out and do new things. So I'm super excited to see what the Make team are going to move on to from an adventure perspective. But I definitely can say there will be many intersecting paths in the future around what we do with you guys and all the cool events coming forward. So yeah, onward and upward and looking forward to it.
Awesome. So Auntie Shan and Auntie Aretha for the community. Okay, cool. Cool, guys. I think that brings us up to our time. Because again, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate all the demos. We love that you guys are participating and engaging in these sorts of things. And this is really what the community is really about. If you want to stick around to just hang, to talk some nonsense, or just dig a bit deeper into stuff, please feel free. But for the formal agenda, that's it, guys. Thank you. We love you all, and thank you for spending some time with us. And we'll see you soon. Yeah. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Nick.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you. Thanks for all the awesome demos.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Bye, guys.
Thanks,
Bye.
everybody.
Thanks. Bye, Annie. Bye, Neil.
Cheers, cheers.
It's Neil the kid. So,